واستغفر الله إن الله كان غفورا رحيما.
And seek forgiveness from Allah. Surely Allah is all forgiving, all compassionate.
ولا تجادل عن الذين يختانون أنفسهم إن الله لا يحب من كان خوانا أثيما.
Do not plead for those who are dishonest to themselves. Allah does not love him who betrays trust and persists in sin. Do not plead for those who are dishonest to themselves. Whoever commits a breach of trust with others, in fact commits a breach of trust with his own self first. For the powers of his head and heart have been placed at his disposal as a trust, and by misusing them he is forcing those powers to support him in acts which involve a breach of trust. In doing so, the person concerned suppresses his conscience, which God has placed as a sentinel over his moral conduct, with the result that is rendered incapable of preventing him from acts of wrong and iniquity. It is only after a man has already carried out this cruel suppression of conscience within himself that he is able to commit acts of sin and iniquity outwardly.
يستخفون من الناس ولا يستخفون من الله وهو معهم إذ يبيتون ما لا يرضى من القول وكان الله بما يعملون محيطا.
They can hide their deeds from men, but they cannot hide them from Allah, for He is with them even when they hold mighty counsels that are unpleasing to Allah. Allah encompasses all their doings.
ها أنتم هؤلاء جادلتم عنهم في الحياة الدنيا فمن يجادل الله عنهم يوم القيامة أم من يكون عليهم وكيلا.
You pleaded on their behalf in this worldly life, but who will plead with Allah on their behalf on the day of resurrection? Or who will be their defender there?
وَمَن يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا أَوْ يَظْلِمْ نَفْسَهُ ثُمَّ يَسْتَغْفِرِ اللَّهَ يَجِدِ اللَّهَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا.
He who does either evil or wrongs himself and then asks for the forgiveness of Allah will find Allah all forgiving, all compassionate.
وَمَن يَكْسِبْ إِثْمًا فَإِنَّمَا يَكْسِبُهُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا.
He who commits a sin commits it only to his detriment. Surely Allah is all-knowing, all-wise.
وَمَن يَكْسِبْ خَطِيئَةً أَوْ إِثْمًا ثُمَّ يَرْمِ بِهِ بَرِيئًا فَقَدِ احْتَمَلَ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا.
But he who commits either a fault or a sin and then casts it upon an innocent person lays upon himself the burden of a false charge and a flagrant sin.
وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَهَمَّت طَّائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُضِلُّوكَ وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِن شَيْءٍ وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا.
O Messenger, but for Allah's favor and mercy upon you, a party of them had resolved to mislead you, yet they only misled themselves and could not have harmed you in any way. Allah revealed to you the book and wisdom, and He taught you what you knew not. Great indeed has been Allah's favor upon you. Yet they only misled themselves and could not have harmed you in any way. Even if some people succeeded in their design to obtain from the Prophet, peace be upon him, a wrong judgment in their favor by presenting a false account of events, the real loss would have been theirs rather than the Prophet's, peace be upon him. For the real criminals in the sight of God are the perpetrators of that fraud and not the Prophet, peace be upon him, who might in good faith have delivered a verdict that actually did not conform to the facts. Whoever obtains a judgment in his favor by tricking the court deludes himself into believing that by such tricks he can bring right to his side. Right remains with its true claimant regardless of judgments obtained by fraud and deception.
لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس ومن يفعل ذلك ابتغاء مرضات الله فسوف نؤتيه أجرا عظيما.
Most of their secret conferrings are devoid of good, unless one secretly enjoins in charity, good deeds, and setting the affairs of men right. We shall grant whoever does that seeking to please Allah a great reward.
ومن يشاقق الرسول من بعد ما تبين له الهدى ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين نوله ما تولى ونصله جهنم وساءت مصيرا.
As for him who sets himself against the messenger and follows a path other than that of the believers, even after true guidance had become clear to him, we will let him go to the way he has turned to, and we will cast him into hell, an evil destination. We will let him go to the way he has turned to. When, after revelation from God, the Prophet, peace be upon him, delivered his verdict in favor of the innocent Jew rather than the dishonest Muslim, the latter was so seized by an un-Islamic, egotistic and chauvinistic considerations that he left Medina, went straight to Makkah to join the ranks of the enemies of Islam and of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and undertook open opposition. The verse alludes to that incident.
إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء ومن يشرك بالله فقد ضل ضلالا بعيدا.
Truly, it is only associating others with Allah in His divinity that Allah does not forgive, and forgives anything besides that to whomsoever He wills. Whoever associates others with Allah in His divinity has indeed strayed far away. Truly, it is only associating others with Allah in His divinity that Allah does not forgive. In this and the following verses, we are asked to consider coolly the end result of obsession with rage and anger, and what kind of people one chooses to identify with in place of the righteous people from whom one foolishly disassociates oneself.
إن يدعون من دونه إلا إناثا وإن يدعون إلا شيطانا مريدا.
Rather than call upon Him, they call upon goddesses, and call upon a rebellious Satan, No one sets up Satan as his God in the sense that he makes him the object of his ritual worship and declares him to be God in so many words. The way to make Satan one's God is to entrust one's reins to him and let oneself be drawn helplessly in whichever direction he wants. The relationship between the two is, then, that of worshipper and worshipped. This shows that either absolute, unreserved obedience to or blind following of anybody is tantamount to worshipping him. so that whoever indulges in this kind of absolute obedience is guilty of worshipping a god other than the one true God.
لعنه الله وقال لأتخذن من عبادك نصيبا مفروضا.
Upon whom Allah has laid His curse. He said to Allah, I will take it to myself an appointed portion of your servants. I will take it to myself an appointed portion of your servants. This shows that Satan is determined to lay his claim to a portion of men's time, to their effort and labor, to their energies and capacities, to their material belongings and to their offspring, and would somehow trick them into devoting a sizable portion of all these in his cause.
وَلَأُضِلَّنَّهُمْ وَلَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُبَتِّكُنَّ آذَانَ الْأَنْعَامِ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرَانًا مُبِينًا.
And shall lead them astray, and shall engross them in vain desires, and I shall command them, and they will cut off the ears of the cattle, and I shall command them, and they will disfigure Allah's creation. He who took Satan rather than Allah for his guardian has indeed suffered a manifest loss. And I shall command them, and they will cut off the ears of the cattle. The reference here is to a superstitious Arabian custom. It was customary among the Arabs that after a camel had given birth to 5 or 10 young to slit her ears and let her go in the name of their deity. They considered it forbidden to put her to any work. Likewise, the male camel that had caused the birth of 10 camels was consecrated to some deity. The slitting of ears symbolized this consecration. And I shall command them, and they will disfigure Allah's creation. To alter God's creation in some respect does not mean changing its original form. If that was meant, human civilization would have to be considered satanic in its entirety. For civilization consists essentially of man's putting to use the resources endowed by God. Hence the alteration of God's creation, which is characterized as satanic, consists in using a thing not for the purpose for which it is created by God. In other words, all acts performed in violation either of one's true nature or of the intrinsic nature of other things are the result of the misleading promptings of Satan. These include, for instance, sodomy, birth control, monasticism, celibacy, sterilization of either men or women, turning males into eunuchs, diverting females from the functions entrusted to them by nature, and driving them to perform the functions for which men were created. These and numerous similar measures are enacted by Satan's disciples in this world, which amounts on their part to saying that the laws of the Creator were faulty, and that they would like to reform them.
يَعِدُهُمْ وَيُمَنِّيهِمْ وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا.
Satan makes promises to them and fills them with vain hopes, but whatever he promises them is merely delusion. Satan makes promises to them and fills them with vain hopes. Satanic operations are based on making attractive promises and raising high hopes. Whenever Satan wants to mislead men, whether individually or collectively, he tries to inspire them with utopian expectations. In some, he inspires expectations of ecstatic pleasure and outstanding success in their individual lives. He inspires others with prospects for achieving national glory. To still others, he promises the well-being of mankind. He makes people feel confident that they can arrive at the ultimate truth without the aid of revealed knowledge. He deludes others into believing that God neither exists nor that there is any life after death. He comforts others with the belief that even if there is an afterlife, they will be able to escape punishment through the intercession of certain persons. In short, Satan extends to different groups of people different promises and expectations with a view to seducing them.
أولئك مأواهم جهنم ولا يجدون عنها محيصا.
For these people, their abode shall be hell, and from there they shall find no way of escape.
والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سندخلهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا وعد الله حقا ومن أصدق من الله قيلا.
But those who believe and do good, we shall cause them to enter the gardens beneath which rivers flow. Here they will abide forever. This is Allah's promise in truth, and whose word is truer than Allah's.
ليس بأمانيكم ولا أماني أهل الكتاب من يعمل سوءا يجز به ولا يجد له من دون الله وليا ولا نصيرا.
It is neither your fancies nor the fancies of the people of the book which matter. Whoever does evil shall reap its consequence, and will find none to be his protector and helper against Allah.
وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ مِن ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلَمُونَ نَقِيرًا.
Whoever does good and believes, whether he is male or female, such shall enter the garden, and they shall not be wronged in the slightest.
وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِّمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا.
And whose way of life could be better than that of he who submits his whole being to Allah, does good, and follows exclusively the way of Abraham, peace be upon him, whom Allah took for a friend.
وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُحِيطًا.
Whatever is in the heavens and in the earth belongs to Allah. Allah encompasses everything. Whatever is in the heavens and in the earth belongs to Allah. To submit to God is the best course for man, for it conforms fully to ultimate reality. Since God is the Lord of the heavens and the earth and all that lies therein, the only right attitude for man is to give up his unlimited freedom and willingly commit himself to serve and obey God. Allah encompasses everything. If man will neither submit to God nor stop acting in defiance of Him, he should bear in mind that he can never escape from God's grip, for His power encompasses him completely.
وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ في يتامى النساء اللاتي لا تؤتونهن ما كتب لهن وترغبون أن تنكحوهن والمستضعفين من الولدان وأن تقوموا لليتامى بالقسط وما تفعلوا من خير فإن الله كان به عليما.
They ask you to pronounce laws concerning women. Say, Allah pronounces to you concerning them, and reminds you of the injunctions which were recited to you in the book about female orphans, whom you do not give what has been ordained for them, and whom you wish to marry out of greed. and the commandments relating to the children who are weak and helpless. Allah directs you to treat the orphans with justice. Allah is well aware of whatever good you do. They ask you to pronounce laws concerning women. The actual query about women is not spelled out directly. The judgment pronounced a little later on in response to that query, however, makes it abundantly clear what the query was. Say, Allah pronounces to you concerning them. This is not a response to the query itself. Before attending to this, God once again emphasizes that people should implement His directives regarding orphans in general, and orphan girls in particular, as mentioned at the beginning of this surah. This shows the importance of the rights of orphans in the sight of God. The protection of their rights, as we have pointed out, had already been stressed forcefully. But that was not deemed sufficient. Hence, when problems of family life came up for discussion, the question of the well-being of orphans automatically arose even before answering the questions people raised about female orphans, whom you do not give what has been ordained for them. This alludes to verse 3 of this surah. And if you fear that you might not treat the orphans justly, then marry the women that seem good to you, and whom you wish to marry out of greed. The words of the text, وَتَرْغَبُونَ أَن تَنْكِحُوهُنَّ, may be interpreted as, whom you wish to marry out of greed, and also whom you do not wish to marry. In explanation of this verse, Aisha states that in those days, guardians of orphans who had any significant inheritance from their parents used to perpetrate many wrongs on their wards. If the girl was both rich and good-looking, the guardian desired to marry her and exploit both her attractiveness and wealth without either having to make the bridal due, meher, or even having to undertake her maintenance. If the girl was ugly, the guardian would neither marry her nor allow her to get married, for she might thus get a husband who would support her claim for her legitimate rights. And the commandments relating to the children who are weak and helpless. The reference here is to the injunctions regarding the protection of the rights of orphans at the beginning of the surah.
وَإِنِ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ وَإِن تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا.
If a woman fears either ill treatment or aversion from her husband, it is not wrong for the husband and wife to bring about reconciliation among themselves by compromising on their rights, for settlement is better. Man's soul is always prone to selfishness, but if you do good and are God-fearing, then surely Allah is aware of the things you do. If the actual response to the query begins here, in order to appreciate the response fully, one would do well to consider the query itself. In the days of ignorance, a man was free to marry an unlimited number of women, who had virtually no rights. When the preliminary verses of the present surah were revealed, this freedom was circumscribed in two ways. First, the maximum number of wives was fixed at 4. Second, justice, that is equal treatment of wives, was laid down as a necessary condition for marrying more than one. This gives rise to the question whether a person is obligated by Islam to feel equally towards each of his wives, to love each to an equal degree, and treat them equally even in respect of sexual relationship. Such questions are especially relevant with regard to a husband, one of whose wives might be, say, afflicted with either sterility, permanent sickness, or who is incapable of sexual intercourse. Does justice demand that if he fails to live up to the standards of equality mentioned above, that he should renounce his first wife in order to marry the second? Moreover, where the first wife is disinclined to agree to annulment of the marriage, is it appropriate for the spouses to make a voluntary accord between themselves, according to which the wife, towards whom the husband feels relatively less attracted, voluntarily surrenders some of her rights, prevailing upon her husband not to repudiate the marriage? Would such an act be against the dictates of justice? It is to questions such as these that these verses are addressed. By compromising on their rights, for settlement is better. It is better for the spouses to come to a mutual understanding so that the wife may remain with the same man with whom she has already spent part of her life. Man's soul is always prone to selfishness. The selfishness on the part of the wife is that even though she is conscious of the causes which have contributed to her husband's aversion towards her, she nevertheless expects from him the treatment that a husband accords to the wife that he loves. The selfishness of the husband, on the other hand, lies in suppressing her unduly and curtailing her rights to an intolerable extent merely because she is keen to continue to live with him even though she has lost her attraction for him. Then surely Allah is aware of the things you do. Here too, God urges the male, as he usually does in such matters, to be magnanimous. God urges a man to treat his wife, who has probably spent a considerable number of years with him as his companion, with kindliness and grace in spite of the aversion that he has come to feel for her. He also urges man to love God, for if he were to deprive him of his loving care and blessing in order to punish him for his shortcomings, what place would he have under the sun?